everybody, this is JDGaming back today with a different type of deck profile than you may be used to. This is the first time that I've seen a structured deck, and I was like, wow, I gotta pick up 3 of these things because I am just so intrigued with these cards. So I went on this wild goose chase in my neighborhood, went to a Target, found 1 copy, then went to a Meijer, none, another Target, none, then next day went back to that Target, thought they would restock, still none, went to a Walmart, finally found exactly 2 left, and I ended up getting the 3 copies that I needed to make this thing. But there are just so many cool interactions between these new cards like Lair of Darkness, Lady of Lament. Lilith has a lot of different interactions with trap-based strategies like trap tricks and artifacts, and you know, things that I definitely do enjoy playing as well. So I definitely want to pick up this deck and see what it synergizes with, but first I wanted to do kind of a standard deck just to show kind of the basics of what this deck is able to do, and then this will serve kind of as a tutorial for anyone looking to build their deck. Honestly, most of the cards in this deck are things that I was able to pick up through Legendary Collection Kaiba, Cyberse Link, and the Lair of Darkness structure decks that are still in stores right now. It wasn't a goal of mine to do it per se, but just a lot of the cards that I ended up choosing happened to be that way. So if you're trying to build on a budget, then this is a pretty good thing for you to start with. And then, of course, I'll go through just my reasonings for why certain things are in here in the quantities they are, what purpose they serve, what they are actually going to do, and then maybe that'll give you a starting point for what you can do with some of these cards. But if you don't want to see that, you just want to see the list, alphabetical profile is in the end of the video as always, and I have a timestamp linked in the description box and comment section below, pinned to the top, so you can easily access that for your convenience. And then if you have any questions for kind of like reasonings for, you know, why are you playing this? I don't think this is a good idea. Why did you forget this or whatever? You know, I go through all my reasoning in the middle, so you can go and check that out. But without further ado, let's build Lair of Darkness. Our Lair of Darkness themed deck comes from the name of the spell card, the new field that is included in this deck, and it has 3 main abilities. The first is it transforms everything on the field into a dark monster, which could be good or bad because it prevents you from going into monsters like Naturia Beast or Miss Starboy, and again, that can actually counter your opponent's strategies. The second ability is what really has a lot of people excited, myself included. It allows you to tribute your opponent's dark monster once per turn as part of your effect activations. So Enemy Controller is a prime example of a card that could take advantage of one of your opponent's monsters to then steal another one, and then you can make all these crazy plays with that. And then the final effect is you're able to go and summon a number of Torment tokens with these stats, Dark level 3, 1000, normal Fiend monsters, that basically add up to the number of monsters that were tributed during the turn player's turn onto their field to replace all the monsters that they lost that turn. And so really it's that second ability that opens up a lot of really cool synergies, but even the first and last effect have some nice uses within this deck and with other interesting cards as well. So the 2 main support cards that come with this deck are Arima, the Wicked Warden, and Lilith, Lady of Lament, for a lot of alliteration there. Essentially, Arima has 2 big things. It serves as a discard outlet terraforming for your Lair of Darkness. If you don't already have one, you can go and fetch that for some extra consistency. And then its other ability is you could tribute a dark monster once per turn in order to draw a card. But it has a spin on that ability where if you tribute a dark monster that's not Arima, one of your other guys, or maybe even one of your opponents thanks to the Lair, you're able to search a monster that has 2000 or more defense that's dark from your deck, and essentially that lets you go for your boss monster, Darkest Diabolos, which we will go over in just a moment. So good effects all around, level 4, 1700 with 0 defense, so lots of interesting applications there. The fact that it is a monster that has the ability of terraforming for this deck is very interesting because it allows it to serve as that terraforming, as an allure target, and a lot of other interesting things as well. Lilith has 2000 attack for a level 3 monster, and you can summon it off Tour Guide for that type of a deck if you would like. And if you don't special summon her in some way, the normal summoned card automatically gets cut to 1000 attack, which is kind of bad, but the quick effect is really what is interesting for a lot of different builds like trap tricks or even just fetching artifacts or things like that. As a quick effect with Lilith, you can go and tribute a dark monster and reveal 3 normal traps from your deck, and just like Power Tool Dragon, have your opponent choose one of them for you to set onto the field randomly so they don't even know what you got, and then you shuffle the remaining cards back into the deck. You can only use that effect of Lilith as a hard once per turn, but again, with Lair of Darkness, you can go and tribute your opponent's monsters, or you could go and get rid of some of your other free guys as well, like the Torment token. So Lilith is extremely powerful, and even just her alone can be used in other decks that use trap cards in high capacity. So it's a very interesting card that I'm definitely looking forward to dealing with. But for now, we're going to stick solely with this deck just to see what its capabilities are. And that means we're going to invest in 3 copies of our Darkest Diabolos, Lord of the Lair, which honestly, even Konami is forgetting this thing is not a fiend. It is a dragon, level 8 monster with 3000 attack, 2000 defense, really nice stat line for a lot of synergies, and it has 2 powerful effects. So first of all, if a dark monster you control is tributed, except during the damage step, you could special summon this card from the graveyard if it was already there when you tributed it, or from your hand even if not. And that even if not looks kind of funny, but it basically means if you use Arima's effect and tribute a different dark monster, you can add Diabolos to your hand and immediately summon it to the field, because it doesn't matter that it wasn't there when you tributed for Arima. You could still summon because that tribute requirement was met. That other ability is really nice because it summons itself from the graveyard or from the hand, so you're able to just go and deal with this thing. It's never dead, pretty much. Its second ability is you could tribute a dark monster and have your opponent place a card from their hand on either the top or bottom of the deck, much like the other variants of Diabolos. This is a very good effect. Only thing with it is an ignition effect. Lilith is the only quick effect out of these, unfortunately, but they all do have tribute type of triggers on them for the rest of the cards. The thing with Diabolos is you can only use each of its effects once per turn, so you can't summon more than one of them by its own effect once per turn. But that does have a protection effect as well. It can't be targeted by card effects, and it can't be tributed while it's on the field. So no kaijus, no opponent getting rid of it in the mirror match in that way. So it's a pretty good boss monster, very reminiscent of 𝗮𝗄 for the Dark Worlds because of its high power and ability to keep coming back for free. And then the last card that came out in this deck, we're actually not running here. 𝕮𝖊𝖊𝖓𝖙𝖊𝖓𝖙𝖘 is a very interesting card. Lets you tribute any dark monster that's 3000 or less attack, and that does have a lot of power for allowing you to trigger any of these cards. It does have a virus-like effect that lingers for 3 turns, but the biggest issue I have with it is the fact that it does not let you go and look at your opponent's hand, which is pretty important depending on the build. You can obviously use that card. It is very powerful. It's just if you're trying to use Mind Crush, it ends up being subpar. So from here, actually part of the core is going to be some lineup of viruses. Usually some people are back and forth with this. They're like, well, this card, these cards are really powerful, but they're kind of terrible to draw. Well, yeah, but all of these are triggerable off of the Diabolos because the 3000 attack, 2000 defense dark monster pretty much satisfies all the virus's conditions, and these are blowout cards that you're able to search off of Lilith. That's why you usually play 3, mix and match them however you see fit. That best matches your play environment. But Eradicator is usually good because when you're able to hit spells or in a mirror match hit traps or whatever, that's a pretty good way of just sealing out the game, and you are able to see your opponent's next 3 turns of draws. And then Full Force Virus works nicely in this build in particular because we're going to be looking at Destrudo to help supplement this deck, and Destrudo through Ancient Fairy Dragon has high enough defense that we could tribute for Full Force. So if you're not familiar with this guy, basically lets you tribute a dark monster with 2000 or more defense to check all your opponent's cards for 3 turns and then destroy any monsters with 1500 or less defense. So that's a lot of weak monsters, that's a lot of strong monsters. You can't hit hand traps with it, but if you really wanted, you could side deck 𝗮𝗊𝖊𝖓 or whatever. There are a lot of different things you could do, but Full Force essentially hits most of your opponent's troublesome monsters that you would have to deal with, and it is very easy to trigger off of the Darkest Diabolos. So just a few cards, you want 3 to make sure you get at least 1 of them off of that Lilith, and then to kind of supplement it, just play some normal traps. From here, I like playing the 2 Mind Crush. That's the main reason I like playing those 2 viruses over the Grinning Grave. It's because you do get access to seeing cards in your opponent's hand, and then you're able to fetch 1 Mind Crush fairly easily if you play 2. You'll notice I'm not playing 3 of anything, essentially because, yeah, we're not guaranteed. We have a 66% chance, and as long as all the cards you're choosing are helpful cards, having 2/3 of a shot of choosing exactly what you want is pretty good, versus you're gonna load up your deck a little too much sometimes and then draw things you don't want if you end up playing the 3. That's basically why I'm going with 2. It's like a safe number where I don't mind drawing it. it. If I draw it, great. Just choose between some powerhouses that can blow out your opponent. Similarly to playing 2 D barriers, part of the reason, honestly, was because I was able to pick up a couple of these through, Cyberslink structure is still around, so I felt this is a pretty interesting type of thing for just a beginner. You could go ahead and pick these up just through structure decks that are in stores right now. And then Dimensional Barrier, honestly, if you're not playing this in the main, you're probably playing it on the side anyway, so it's just an example of a normal trap that's strong enough that you would actually be willing to play it in this deck. But here I'm just playing 7 traps. You can easily up the number slightly. If you're playing Pot of Desires, like we will eventually be getting to, then you want to consider how that affects the number of traps that you're going to play. From here, this is where we introduce the Destrudo Engine. So we're going to play 3 copies of Terraforming to ensure we get Lair of Darkness on top of the Arima, because you may be thinking, well, that's so many copies. You have 3 Lairs, 3 Arimas, and 3 Terraformings, and yeah, that is a lot, to be honest, but even so, this deck relies so much on that Lair of Darkness spell that you want to make sure you have an extra more so than you don't have it. And if you can make use of extra copies, then that's a good thing. And we can make use of extra copies through our Ancient Fairy Dragon, which is part of the reason why we're going to use the Destrudo Engine in the first place. So to essentially let us access that, we play 2 copies of Dragon Ravine, because this lets us yard a dragon from our deck to the graveyard by discarding any 1 card. So discard extra copies of Lair of Darkness, Terraforming, whatever, and yard a Destrudo. And if this is already in your graveyard, you could go ahead and send 𝕮𝗏𝖏𝖏, because don't forget, that is a dragon monster, and he can be summoned from your graveyard. So that's the reason we're choosing this engine. It kind of ties everything together in a nice, succinct way. And then the Destrudo, of course, has 3000 defense, so it's a full force target. It's a level 7 tuner monster. It can be summoned from your hand or graveyard, much like 𝕮𝗏𝖏𝖏, by just having your life points and then choosing a monster you control that's level 6 or lower. Destrudo then becomes decreased by that monster's level, essentially making it so if you tune a non-tuner that you chose along with him, you always get 7. And that's really powerful because you can access Ancient Fairy Dragon to go and play around with your field spells, swap them around, and you can even go for Dark Strike Fighter. And I know a lot of people were like, Dark Strike Fighter, is terrible after the errata, but you could tribute this guy and he's a dark monster, which means you can go and summon 𝕮𝗏𝖏𝖏 right out of your hand or graveyard just by going for this if you already have it. So these 2 are the only extra deck monsters I'm going to cover today, mainly because the rest of the extra deck is really up to choice. Like, you could play a handful of other level 7 synchros, like you could go Yazi with Black Rose and like a Mare Mare tuner monster to try and go for a weird negation bait out sequence or whatever. Or you could play some link monsters. You could play a bunch of targets for winter cherries. There are a lot of different things you can do, but these 2 I feel are the key things you would want to run in a Destrudo engine for this deck in particular. And then to kind of help make things a little more consistent, because 𝕮𝗏𝖏𝖏 is decent to yard and Destrudo's definitely good, but what if you already have those? Well, that's where our Supreme King engine comes in. So we play the Dark Worm along with a single gate 0, and essentially when we yard Dark Worm through any of these effects of Dragon Ravine, we're able to go and revive it back, get this card for free, so then that becomes an allure target or whatever, and then you're able to go ahead and use Dark Worm with Destrudo to go and summon one of your 7s without a normal summon. And that without a normal summon is key here, because you're able to go and normal summon your Lilith or Arima to then tribute and then get their effects off and trigger your 𝕮𝗏𝖏𝖏. So you could go Armageddon Knight if you want even more consistency here, but I feel like this engine is really quite good at getting all your plays intact here without getting rid of your normal summon, and that just gives you more mileage out of your cards that are just so normal summon heavy. And then, as if that weren't enough, to kind of add on to the Dragon Ravine engine here, we're playing a single Foolish Burial, because it's just generically useful for yarding any of these cards, and on top of that, we'll be playing 2 copies of Dragon Shrine, which essentially is the same thing if you're hitting dragons, which again, 𝕮𝗏𝖏𝖏𝖏, Dark Worm, and Destrudo are all dragons, so it's essentially 3 copies of this. And then if you don't need these guys, you could just pitch them for other things, and that's totally fine. So that is kind of the Destrudo package here. Lets you easily access Ancient Fairy Dragon, and that's really cool because usually what you want to end up with as your final board for the turn is Lair of Darkness with 𝕮𝗏𝖏𝖏𝖏 on the field, and then if you're able to normal summon Lilith on top of that, then you're gold. Usually you could set some sort of a trap card either through drawing Lilith or one of the traps themselves, and then the 𝕮𝗏𝖏𝖏𝖏 through those traps will give you so much control. You'll be able to take a very, very fast victory from your opponent. And then Ancient Fairy Dragon lets you play between Dragon Ravine, so you could get multiple copies of that. So that's actually pretty good. Now we have 9 copies essentially of the Lair of Darkness, because now Ancient Fairy Dragon lets us use multiple copies of Dragon Ravine to yard both Destrudo and 𝕮𝗏𝗄𝗡, and then we could go and bring that out. You know, there are just a lot of cool things that we could do because of Ancient Fairy Dragon and the pair of Dragon Ravines. And then for some draw power, we play 3 copies of Allure of Darkness, because again, you have the copy of 𝕮𝗓𝖏 that you can banish for free, and then a few extra copies of like Dark Worm or whatever that you may not need. You could go get rid of that. Even 𝕮𝗏𝗏𝗡, if you already have 1 copy, since he's restricted to once per turn for his summon condition anyway, you could just go ahead and get rid of extra copies if that means you get the combo pieces necessary to get everything set up. And then along with that, 2 Pot of Desires. Why 2? Well, mainly because you don't want to ever draw more than 1, because this one is a hard once per turn, unlike Allure. And the only time this is dead is if you have not yet used your Destrudo. At that point, it's too risky, so hang on to it for that. That's why I play the Allures, to help us get into our pieces, get our Destrudo. But once we're set up there, you're free to Desires. It helps you draw into your trap cards, helps you establish your board, and then pretty much just take a very fast cheese win there. And then finally, I mean, we're already on the tech part of this. We play the 3 copies of Enemy Controller. I know there are people that are like, oh, you know, just play 1 or 2 of these because the consistency. I mean, you know me, I'm JDGaming. I gotta play 3 copies of this thing. And honestly, I like this because it's a quick play out if you're going first or second. So if you set this thing, lets you trigger during your opponent's turn anytime. If you're going second, you just drop Lair of Darkness and sack one of your opponent's monsters with Econ. And since you're not using a monster, a lot of times it's hard for your opponent to actually out that with any of their cards, their hand traps or whatever. So really versatile card. I personally would suggest it over Raigeki in a lot of situations, because this card just wins you games for so many reasons. It lets you dodge weird effects on your monsters by tributing them. You can obviously tribute your opponent's monsters in a pseudo kaiju like way, so that it's really just even harder to dodge than Raigeki. And then you're able to just steal games by getting rid of one of your opponent's monsters, stealing another one of their guys, and then because you tributed, you bring out 𝕮𝗏𝗏𝗡, and then that usually gives you enough damage that you can just win that turn, because you still haven't even factored in a normal summon, some special summons, and all this other stuff. So that's why I chose to play that. But essentially, this is a quick and dirty standard version of Lair of Darkness. If you watched this video in its entirety, thanks. Hopefully you found it a bit helpful as kind of a quick and dirty tutorial into the Lair of Darkness structure, and maybe it gives you some really cool ideas for how to build this deck in other ways. I know I'm definitely looking forward to using Lilith in some other trap-centric strategies, so we're going to see where this goes in the future. But we're going to start off with just this standard profile here. So for the main, we start off with triple Arima, Darkest 𝕮𝗏𝗏𝗡, 1 Destrudo, triple Lilith, triple Dark Worm, and a 𝕮𝗓𝗏. And then we have triple Allure of Darkness, double Dragon Ravine, double Dragon Shrine, triple JDGaming, 1 Foolish Burial, triple Namesake of the Structure deck, Lair of Darkness, double Pot of Desires, triple Terraforming, and then for normal traps we play double Z-Barrier, 1 Eradicator Epidemic, and 2 copies, excuse me, of Full Force Virus, and double Mind Crush for a 40-card main deck. And then, no, this is not a 2-card extra, but the only 2 cards that I'm showing in this specific profile are Ancient Fairy Dragon and Dark Strike Fighter that you go off of the Destrudo, mainly because the other 13 cards I honestly feel like you can mix and match your favorite level 7 synchros, link monsters, and then maybe even like Ghost Reaper targets, because there's so many different things you can do with this extra deck, but these 2 are the main ones you really should be playing in a Destrudo build of the deck. That's the end of this video, but if you'd like to see more of this series, you can click the annotation on the right, or you can see the last video I did by clicking the one on the left. If you enjoyed, I encourage you guys to leave a like and share it with others you think who may enjoy it as well. And if you'd really like to see more updates, then subscribe to JDGaming for more Yu-Gi-Oh videos. Thanks guys, this is JDGaming, hope you guys enjoyed as always, and I'll see you guys next time.